Good evening, all. I hope this week's treating you well. Just a few things from yours truly about what's going on in the culture wars this week. And I'm going to start off with Jacob Rees-Mogg. It's a name we haven't heard much of late. He's very busy being the leader of the House of Commons and all that. But he put out a photograph on social media today of his children, five of them, the boys, all in their Hill House uniforms, all on the step of their Knightsbridge house, getting ready to go to school. You know, it's harmless enough. It's what many parents do. They take a photograph of their kids on the first day back at school in their uniform. It's something, I don't know, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions of parents in the Western world do on social media. But as we've established with the left, there's one rule for them and there's one rule for the people that they hate, you know, and it's not hypocrisy. So whereas they don't go after people who put pictures of their kids going to school, apparently it's wrong if you're Jacob Rees-Mogg. He's exploiting it for political purposes. Well, a fraction of that may be true. He's putting out the statement that his children are ready to go back to school. Okay, this is the government policy and the schools policy, particularly private schools like Hill House, all off to school. Now, I'm not a fan of Hill House myself for the one reason that I went to its rival. You see, there's two prep schools in Knightsbridge in London. Hill House is one of them. It's perhaps the more famous of the two because they have the more outlandish uniform based around, I think, traditional Swiss school garb with the rust-coloured corduroy knickerbockers and the beige sweaters and the beige socks that go with them. I went to the rival school. It's a few streets away, called Sussex House. And we just had a light grey blazer with a burgundy tie, dark grey trousers, grey V-neck sweater with the burgundy trim round the neck. We've always felt we were smarter. We were better turned out than the Hill House boys, who looked frankly ludicrous. But that's all done and dusted. You know, I was 10 when I thought the rival school looked ludicrous. I've grown up since then, and I've also believe you don't drag kids into your political bun fights. And the left did this on Twitter. They dogpiled into Jacob Rees-Mogg, not so much about him, but about his kids. They're saying his kids look weird in that uniform. His kids look like ghosts in that uniform because they're, you know, they're a bit pasty-faced, a bit like their dad. You know, don't see that much sunlight because you're British, right? You know, you don't sort of go around in day-glow tans unless you're some Z-list celebrity wannabe. So to most people, Rees-Mogg's kids just look normal, and it's one of those normal family, the kids off to school photographs. But for the left, no, it's wrong, it's immoral, it's disgusting, it's disgraceful. They weren't going after Jacob Rees-Mogg and his policies and his political stances, and they weren't going after the fact that his children go to this very expensive prep school, which frankly is not as good as Sussex House, in my opinion. You know, as an old Cadogan, I will speak for my old school, but no, they were going after the kids. How weird the kids looked, you know, mocking their names, and just it was disgusting. And this is actually something I find revolting about the left, is that they just don't care about childhood. They don't just go, maybe this isn't the place to plant a battle flag today, maybe some other thing, but they don't believe in the sanctity of the nuclear family. They don't believe in the sanctity of childhood. Everything is fair game to them, and it just repulses me. And when I challenged them on Twitter today about this, the responses I got were it was disgraceful. You're just disgusting. They call themselves good people. They call themselves good people in their bios, but they're anything but disgusting human beings. And then you get the blue check marks eventually waded in with just more of the same, really, more going after the kids. The always disgusting James Felton, a horrible person, horrible left-wing activist, was mocking them, and so too was David Baddiel. I mean, come on, David Baddiel has just sunk You know, he's not a comedian anymore. He's just this kind of establishment mouthpiece. This was once a guy that championed blokey comedy back in the 90s, being lads, not particularly being political. It was about football. It was about being laddish, having fun, seeing the incongruities of life. His humor was based around that. And now he's this sneering, condescending, hate-filled, spiteful bigot who just looks down his nose at just everybody else who's not like him, not Groucho Club establishment. And speaking of comedy, how low Badil is. I mean, he's not even funny on Twitter. I wouldn't even bother following him on Twitter. He's not funny. Like a lot of comedians, and this is another news story that happened this week, was that the BBC announced that they were going to have a bit of a cull of the left-wing comedians. They've that work for the BBC, because for too long BBC comedy has been of a particular political bent, left-wing bent. There's basically their left-wing comedy output and Mrs. Brown's Boys. They think that's balance, and their tentpole political satire shows like Have I Got News for You, Mock the Week are just looking tired, stale formats, propped up by people who are no longer funny. And also panelists, the panelists I have on the shows, Russell Howard, Andy Parsons, Rufus Hound, the example. These people, just who are they? How did they justify getting onto television? Because they're not particularly funny and they don't have a sort of large public following. It's not like people are clamoring to hear what Rufus Hound has to say. In fact, Rufus Hound's career has been a bit strange because he emerged a few years ago from practically nowhere, and was on the Dave channel and done a bit of BBC 9 out of 10 Cats and Mock the Week and all this, but nobody's really sure how he achieved prominence in the first place. He doesn't have any kind of identifiable shtick other than a kind of loose handlebar moustache, but nobody can remember a Rufus Hound joke. A lot of general public aren't even aware of who he is. He's one of these people that insiders in the TV industry seem to take a shine to, and that they're pushed front and center as the kind of next big thing, and yet they never really kick on from there. There are a few comedians that have this kind of protected status. Stuart Lee being one of them. Stuart Lee is not a public favourite. You couldn't call him a public favourite. He's a favourite in a kind of very niche world, and in particular amongst his fellow left-leaning comedians, he's almost revered, put on a pedestal. But outside of that, the public don't really care that much for Stuart Lee, but he keeps getting work. But the BBC are going to have this, supposedly they're going to have a cull of left-wing comics, and predictably the blue check marks go into meltdown thing. This is another example of the kind of freedom of speech and freedom to hold the government to account and speaking truth to power. But as we've seen with Nish Kumar and the Horrible Histories and the MASH report is not a show that is a public favourite. It's just kind of the BBC's output. It annoys more people than it entertains. And this isn't speaking truth to power. The Nish Kumar Horrible Histories thing was disingenuous. It's not truth, and it's not particularly to any power. The establishment media has been holding the power, and they don't speak truth to any kind of power. It's just ideology just rammed down the public's throat, and the public have been turning off from the BBC in droves, and the BBC have realised they are in a spiral. Ratings are declining, approval is declining, and there's more outrage and furore. And will the BBC understand this, get this in time before the plug is yanked? Because frankly, at the moment, most people wouldn't shed a tear if the BBC's funding got pulled. Speaking of the BBC and backtracking, an announcement went out today that indeed the words to Land of Hope and Glory, Rule Britannia and the other patriotic songs will be reinstated at the Proms. Why were you worrying in the first place? They were never going to do this. Well, what we've seen, and there's a saying that goes, don't piss on my shoes and tell me it's raining. And this is what we've been getting from the BBC and from their left-wing apologists this week, is that, yes, the guest conductor for the last night of the Proms did say that the lockdown was the perfect opportunity to address things like Black Lives Matter issues and not have the patriotic songs. And then came the climb down. No, we're going to have the patriotic songs, but we're not going to have the words. We're not going to sing the words because it's too difficult. We can't have a choir. We can't have this, that, and the other. Then that was the excuse given. So you're going to have the songs, but you can't have the words. Now we can have the words, apparently. You know, the problem's fixed. But now the apologists for the BBC are saying, well, it was no. There was never going to. It was just all a right-wing fantasy that they weren't going to sing the lyrics. Sorry. We know from the statements. We've got the statements from the BBC. We've got the statements from the guest conductor. We have enough statements going out there. We have the Katrina Lewis, the executive producer of Songs of Praise, said, you know, don't have the songs, don't have the lyrics. We had David Baddiel, again, his name's cropping up. I can't really repeat what he said about the about Land of Hope and Glory and Rule Britannia, but this they're backtracking. But sorry, no, we've got the evidence. We know what we saw with our own two eyes, and don't try and pretend otherwise. But this is the whole gaslighting thing. You know, it's so obvious that attempts are being made to gaslight. No. We were never having a go at Jacob Rees-Mogg's kids. No. Comedy is not left-wing. The BBC is not left-wing. In fact, all its news reporters are right-wing. That was another one I heard this week. Somebody told me with a straight face that Laura Kuenssberg and John Humphreys were Tories. I mean, it's utterly ludicrous. You know, don't gaslight us. We know the truth. And that brings me on to the final point this week. So why do the left do this? You know, you have on social media, the left generally have two sorts of days. There's a day when they're all galactically stupid, and there's a day when they're all lying to your face. Today was the galactically stupid day. But you know, other days you get the being lying to your face. And Academic Agent put out on Twitter. He thought that most people are stupid, but to what degree are they stupid? Well, that's an interesting point. One to think about. I'm not going to sort of, in a knee-jerk way, just agree and say everybody's stupid. But it got me thinking about why the left galactically stupid, and what is stupidity anyway? Are we talking about ignorance of facts? Are we talking low brain processing power? Are we talking IQ levels? We have to define the parameters of what we're talking about. But I will say this on the topic of intelligence and stupidity, is that once upon a time, if you went to university, it was a mark of intelligence that you studied hard at school and you got the requisite grades and you did all the right things to go to a place of higher education, where you would learn more and you'd be challenged to think more, and you come out and you would generally be regarded as intelligent. And those people who didn't, the working class people who didn't go to university, they were considered stupid in comparison. But we've seen that perhaps the opposite is true today, that those coming out of universities are lacking that kind of cognitive brain power to look at things in a very analytical and apply their thoughts and really work the brain cells. And it's the working class people who haven't been to higher education who seem to have more wisdom and nous about things, that they can see things clearly and they can apply their thinking to what they see. And if they don't like something, they have the moral courage to speak up, draw a line in the sand, and say no. I think the ability to say no to something that is obviously fake or obviously deceitful, I think is a mark of intelligence, as well as moral courage. I mean, after all, in the story of the Emperor's New Clothes, all the high and mighty believed they were seeing a fully clothed emperor, and it took the innocent, less developed mind of a child to point out the obvious. So, bring it back to, are people more stupid? I think the question is, has a whole generation of people been taught not to think? I'll go one step further. Have two generations of people been taught not to think? We have, of course, we have the left-wing progressive 20-somethings, the millennials and the Zoomers. But I look over to older people, Brian Cox, AC Grayling, classic examples of Jessica Seymour and Jolyon Morn. You know, older people who switch their brains on. You know, the reason, and it's all just indoctrination. Learn the words, say the words. So I'm not going to say people are not stupid. I'm not going to say that they're dumber. But what I'm saying is that people are being trained not to think. Our higher education institutions are just giving out an orthodoxy, and that's being repeated by the media and by the civil service as well. Don't think, do, conform. And that's been at a level which I don't think I've hitherto seen in my life. So I would say perhaps people are less intelligent than they were 20, 30 years ago because of the power of indoctrination and just encouraging people not to think. And for me, that really does take the biscuit. There you go. Classic custard cream. Nice and refreshing at this time of the evening. Anyway, until next time, keep safe.